So now I am in front of the camera, but I can't see myself. It's totally fine. Hi, everyone online. Hi, everyone in the building. Hi. My name's Eric Gross. I'm the co-founder of the Tech Academy. Thank you all for coming. I know we have some guests, we have some students, and we have remote. Oh, and I don't have a head.
We're zoomed into the PowerPoint, so.
Hi.
If you just go back.
Okay, good. So I've got the sun right in the light right in my eyes. Okay, so we hold these regular tech talks to bring industry experts in to address a wide variety of things for our students. And generally, though, they relate to what happens when I'm done with this program and I go out in the real world. Because when you're here, you're learning what's on the program. And the program preps you well to be a well-rounded entry-level software developer. But then you're going to be thrown out in the real world. And we want you to be as well prepared for that. So rather than have you read about what it's like, we bring in people who are doing it now to talk about that. So I'm very happy to introduce Scott Harvey. Scott Harvey is the VP of Technology at Atmosera, which is a provider of services that sit on top of Microsoft Azure, which is a phenomenal cloud provider of services. It's the one I use primarily as a software developer, so I like what he does. He and I got the chance to sit down for a little while and just get to know each other. I think you'll really like what he has to say about what he sees as being successful attributes of a developer, because it goes beyond just simple advice to concrete examples of what that would look like. Please join me in welcoming Scott Harvey.
Thank you, Eric, for that. And yes, we did have a very good conversation earlier, and I hope that some of that comes through to this talk as we go through it. So, why me? What qualifies me to stand up here and talk to you about what are the good qualities or positive attributes of a software dev? Quite frankly, a lot of fortunate circumstance on my part. I've had good bosses through my career that have taken upon themselves to help me learn what I need to learn to better myself and advance my career in the way that it's gone. So I've been doing this for a long time. You know, back in the IBM PC days, back in 1985, where I had my PC XT sitting on my desk and doing basic programming. Then going to college to learn telephony and apply a hardware focus to software. And I know that's a little bit backwards, but I was always interested in telephony and how that worked, and I wanted to learn more about that. So my degree and background really is more hardware than software, to be honest with you. I got a computer engineering degree from North Carolina State, and I've never built any hardware. You know, I've managed hardware teams, but I took a focus at software that was very hardware centric. And at that time it worked out because there was a lot of marriage of hardware and software as the hardware became smaller and smaller, resulting in what we have today, and a cell phone in every pocket or 7 or 8 devices everywhere else. So it was a really good time to be in firmware at that point. As time progressed, it became less of a good time to be in firmware and a better time to move up the stack. And my career has been largely a result of moving up the stack. You know, again, hardware for my first job, where I was creating card reader and display type functionality for fuel pumps. You know, you go into a fuel pump and you swipe your credit card. Well, you don't do it here in this state, but in other states, you do it. You swipe your credit card, you punch in your PIN number. And
We have people who do that. Yes.
Okay, yes, in this state. Here in Jersey, the 2 states.
Oh, yeah.
But being in charge of that program and driving the firmware for that was the ultimate catalyst for moving into Class 5 office switching and doing software for the marriage of head ends to LTGs and line trunk groups that were the ultimate providers of dial tone at that point. Now, who has a home phone anymore? I know I don't, but lots of people don't have home phones anymore. We've moved on and moved up the technology stack. So after telephony, then I moved into like a carrier Ethernet access type of scenario, where this was right at the time of the bubble burst, and Eric and I have talked about this before. We were building a product for MCI WorldCom at the time, and MCI WorldCom wasn't a very good bet in the 2000 time frame. So we had this product that we had built for MCI WorldCom, and it just didn't work for them because they went bankrupt. So we had no place to sell that. So we had to retool that product and make it something that people could understand. And what people could understand and comprehend at that time is the guide boxes that were being promised required a full infrastructure change out of copper to fiber, etc. And even all of your gear needed to be ripped out in favor of this new stuff. That just didn't work. So leveraging what was in the ground, leveraging the investments that were made already by the big telcos was something that needed to happen. So that's where we found a niche there. Moved out from there to Wilsonville, where I was running the engineering department at Apcon. Apcon's a layer 2 switching visibility company. Essentially, if you have built out your layer 2 network in enterprise type size or campus type size of that scope, how do you make sure that it's running right? So you intercept these packets and you diagnose these packets and make sure that packet A is destined for the right destination and it's the right thing. You're not seeing sync attacks, you're not seeing ACK attacks, you're not seeing NAC attacks, just some basic TCP/IP type stuff. But security was a big mover for that. But ultimately, I was still building hardware. So hardware is a losing proposition in the United States. And to build it, we'll design it here, but building it here still is a problem. So I was looking for something different. And the opportunity presented itself that I could move to Atmosera. Now, Atmosera, as Eric said, is a Azure very specific play. You know, we're a data center manufacturer or a data center provider here in the Portland Metro. If you guys have been here a long time, you may remember us as Easy Street. We've been around for about 23 years. So, but we've retooled ourselves, and about 2 years ago, we decided to go down the path of Microsoft and Azure, and really take a pragmatic look at what we're doing hardware-wise. You know, we got 3 data centers, 1 down here, and then 2 at the Beaverton campus. We lease this space, we provide this compute for people, but ultimately it's still hardware. And how can we move away from that and become more software-centric? So, in looking at that, the owners and the management at the time were looking for somebody that could take a product out of and make a product out of Azure. And what does that mean? So Azure is this litany of SKUs, you know, 1,800 SKUs that will fit together to make something. But it's up to you to make the something, right? So what's it going to be? Ultimately, when you're talking to IT people, you know, they have certain problems to solve. They want to say, I need DR, or I need backup, or I need to migrate out of AWS, or I need to deploy my databases such that I can access them with minimal latency from anywhere around the world. So there are very real problems that they're trying to solve. So what we've done, or what me and my team have done over the past 2 years, is created products, like my Follow Sun database, where we take that data, we cube it up, and we move it around the world in Azure data centers to provide them, clients, the ability to access that data on sub 10, 20 millisecond access rates for that. So again, I've been fortunate in my career to have these stepping stones and to have this kind of ability to move in a direction that I think technology is going. And that is something that, just as a piece of personal career advice, if you can ride that wave and you can keep going and look and have a knack about knowing what's coming next, that's always something that's really important to be looking for. And it's as you'll see, one of the successful attributes of a good dev. So, what about you guys? Well, you're already here associated with the Tech Academy, presumably because you want to learn more about this particular topic, or you want to make a next step in your career and figure out how you move on to the next thing. So, you've already made the first right step in trying to figure out how you get that good base. So, essentially, you got to ante up to the good base, right? There's one thing that's really important for any good dev, and that's you have a good base of coding skills, right? You got to pick a language, become an expert in it. Doesn't matter which language. My language of choice is C, right? So, a dinosaur right here. But what that allows me to do is syntactically, grammatically, I understand languages about where my software devs, and there were 9 different levels at most companies I've worked with, from entry level all the way up to staff and principal engineers. There's a place for people that just want to maintain a certain level. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you want to be an excellent dev and you want to continue to migrate up, you have to have additional skills beyond just the basic coding skills and how you show up, and that we'll talk a little bit about. So, how do attitude and aptitude manifest themselves? So how do you learn, right? Learning is part and parcel of how you have to approach every day. And Eric and I were talking about this. This actually is generational as well. So, and I'll qualify that. When you take somebody my age, roughly 45 years old, and try and manage a millennium, that's a different environment. It's a different dynamic than if I was trying to manage somebody from my own generation. That's not a bad thing. It's just something you need to recognize, right? You need to have good communication with your management team and team leaders to be able to function properly on a team. So having that awareness, understanding how you communicate to each other, whether it be generational or any other means. I'm picking on generation right now, but there are a lot of ways that people communicate with each other. It's important to understand that and be able to recognize how that works, right? For example, if I'm the Gen Xer, Gen Yer that I am, and I'm managing a millennial, typically that generation needs more positive feedback, needs more immediate feedback about what they're doing. Whereas if I'm managing somebody that's from a different generation, what that looks like is I can get feedback on a more regular basis, maybe every quarter, maybe every half, maybe every year, and that's okay. But as information flows more regularly, as the technology has increased, there's more feedback that's available right now. And that's kind of where the up and coming generations are getting this from, is that you can get information at the drop of a hat. So the information is expected. So when I'm talking to somebody that I realize has that need or the desire, I need to adapt to that. And you need to understand. I mean, it's a yin and yang. You need to be aware of it on both sides. But as a manager, I have to adapt to that. But as an employee, you should also recognize that there are differences going on too. How are you invested, right? Do you just do what's required? Do you have a list of requirements? Okay, here's my 3 or 4 things in my sprint, and I've taken care of those things, and now I'm done. Or do you say, hey, I got a backlog over there. Let's go pull off some more of those, and let's go beyond and see if we can't knock a little bit of sprint 2's work into sprint 1. Right? Are you invested in that? Are you challenging the status quo? Right? Are you challenging? There's a time for challenging, there's a time for not. So you got to be careful. This is a fine line to walk. And I don't want you to just walk in and say, hey, I don't like any of this. We've been on there for 2 years, and now we got to start over. That doesn't work either. But challenging when appropriate is also very important. Right? I've always told my employees that their job, part of their job, and a very large part of their job, is to make sure that I don't make a mistake. Right? They're there to make sure I don't make a colossal failure. Now, that's not their job to make sure that I don't totally muck it up, but it is their job to be looking out for me in that when I make that decision, perhaps I'm not considering this, or perhaps I'm not considering that. That's your job to make sure that people like me understand, hey, look, there's this thing over here, maybe we haven't considered that. Is there a way we can consider that? It's really, really important that you have that ability to look around you and know what the landscape looks like and know what the impact of something is when it's possible. What does finish look like? There's a couple of these in here. Finish look like, and does your work perfect? To me, a good dev will put the finishing grammatical syntax on it, whether it be a curly brace, whether it be a semicolon, whatever, pick a language, whatever it is, and then they will turn right around and say, I'm going to wipe that all away because I can do it better. Right? Because you always can. There's always going to be a better technology. There's always going to be a better way to do it. I just learned about this new method. I just learned about this new dynamic. I just learned about this new thing that will make this so much faster and run so much better. That is a fantastic attribute to have, and one that I look for regularly when I'm hiring. The people that are like, oh yeah, I did that, and then I thought about it, and then I got it done. So completion, right? Got to complete, and then when you get it done, you wipe it away and start over, because you can do it better. Now, it's a fantastic attribute, and it's up to people like me to manage that, or your team leaders. So if you get into a team lead position, you'd be looking for people like that, but you actually have to move on to the next task at some point. So done is done at some point, but typically that's a management decision to figure out what the done criteria are, right? It obviously has something to do with the individual developers to what done is, but usually there's a business driver and business criteria what done is, and that's the management function. But understanding where you guys can push it and say, oh man, I can make that work. I can knock 5 seconds off that access time there. I can make this work so much better. I can do it in 5 lines instead of 7. All great attitudes towards software development.
That's very cool.
So, do you believe in what you're doing? Right? And this manifests itself many different ways. For me, and I work a lot. My wife doesn't like it so much, but I do. And that's not a requirement to be a good dev. I don't want to make that impression at all. It's not a requirement to work 70 hours a week to get it done. But I tell you this, if you're invested in it, if you love what you do and you believe in it, you will, because it's not work anymore, right? I love what I do, and I do it all the time. I can't separate myself from it. And separating myself from it actually becomes the work. So, again, you don't have to work till you kill yourself. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying you should actually do it because you love it, not because it's paying the bills. Are you collaborative? Right? And this manifests itself in different ways too, because if you're on a small team and you have a set out task and you're just the only developer on this particular thing, hard to be collaborative. Right? Certainly is. But are you able to work on a team and solve a problem together with 3 or 4 or 5 different people in the time frame allotted when that happens? So are you collaborative? How does that manifest itself, and how do you look good? Are you professional? Again, there's no rules for this. And by the way, this is the big disclaimer on all this is these are my opinions, right? I have been successful in my career hiring and looking for these kinds of qualities in people. So, and talking to my peers, I do believe that they are valued, but they are by no means universal. So please apply them where you can and throw them away where they don't make sense. But are you professional? So to me, that means how you show up to work. I mean, how you talk, how you communicate in email, right? Is it social media? So there's a certain, it depends on what kind of a company you're with, but if you're, let's say you're with a company that's very, very security forward in posture, right? Perhaps they're a financial, that you're in the back office running some reports or tooling for mortgage loans, or IRS, maybe you're keeping tax codes, tax forms from individuals. There's a whole different set of requirements that are on that, and it's up to you as the professional to know what those are and adhere to those rules. And it doesn't, again, apply in all cases, but you need to know what's appropriate and what's not in terms of that. And then, do you know what you're doing? And this links in a lot to the first one. And how do you learn? You know what you're doing, right? You can code, but do you know how to solve that particular problem? I hope not, right? Because the reason I love what I do, and it's engineering. I run the engineering department, and I've built a lot of stuff. Nobody's ever going to ask me to solve the same problem again, right? There's giants that have stood and solved that problem before. It's my job and it's your job to stand on the shoulders of those giants and go farther, right? So you have to know what you're doing, and what that means is you have to be able to do the research. You have to be able to find the answers. You have to be independent, and you have to know and do some investigation on what applies and what doesn't, right? And there are no real specific examples of these, but when I guess I equate this one to knowing where the edges are, right? So a lot of people want to know where the edges are. When you're standing somewhere, where are the edges? So think back in the 1400s when the Portuguese and the Spaniards were out exploring. They had no idea where the edges were. They were exploring. And each one stood on the next one because the one before them drew the map to go this far. The next one drew the map to go that far. They were all steeped in their ability to do the same thing, their basic coding skills, let's call them their basic sailing skills. They could look at the noonday sun and know what latitude they were at. They could look at the stars at night and be able to position that way as well, right? They could drop a line and know how deep the water was, and they could trim a sail to go downwind or upwind. But those big boats didn't go upwind so well, so then they had to figure out, well, where's my land breeze coming from? Where's my sea breeze coming from? That's the base set of skills, right? And then, since they couldn't see the edges, they then had to take all those base set of skills and go figure out how to go to the next place, right? So that's what I think you guys need to do and need to figure out how to do on your own. And there are a lot of people in this room. There are a lot of people that are able to help you. I mean, just my email is available if you want to call or email me. There are a lot of people available to help you go through these kinds of things. So I would recommend that you certainly do use those resources when you have them to get that perspective. Because there are people that have been there before, right? And I think they can give you some good advice on how to get there again. Or go beyond where they went. because it's not my desire for my employees to go as far as I went, right? Professionally or in the coding experience, in the products they develop. They need to go further, right? So you pave the way and then you go farther. So in that, I know that I've kind of gone over those kinds of things. So number one, the good coding skills. You need that. There's your base table stakes. Just like good sailing skills in the 1400s, you need good coding skills to go out and get a job. Then you got to show up in attitude and aptitude. And how that works, I'm sure you guys are going to have questions for. So, go for it. Sure.
Going back to what you mentioned about the dynamic between like a younger millennial
Uh-huh.
employee and an older generation managing, would you say that like the reason because of the need for like, you know, more information for millennials just because they're typically have less experience than somebody who's been in the workforce longer?
No, so I mean, I personally think it's more just generational than that. I don't think it's got more experience, or it's how people were raised, right? And not by any individual mother or father or however your family looks, but more of the time when you were raised, right? What was more acceptable? Like, you know, I have the challenge with my kids right now not to be a helicopter parent, right? I mean, my kids are going to have different challenges than millennials do of today. I do really think it's generational. Now, I also think that people like me need to adapt to that and not put it on you, right? Because it's not your problem, right? I need to understand what drives you, what motivates you as a manager, right? So this is beyond just the coding stuff. As a manager, I need to understand what drives you and motivates you and provide an environment you can succeed. Because if I don't do that, then you're not gonna. It doesn't matter what, if I treat you like a 45-year-old coder, you're not going to get what you need out of that relationship with me as a manager, so you won't be successful. And that would be a failure on my part, and you should certainly, as much as you can, try and find an environment where you're going to get that feedback that you need.
I was going to ask, so going forward with that, how do you communicate to your, like a manager, you know, that you might need more feedback without kind of appearing as though you need to be micromanaged or you're not sure like what you're doing?
Well, so, and that's a really good question. I think it depends on the maturity of the manager, to be honest with you, because any way you slice that question, it could be perceived any different number of ways. But when you're out looking for jobs, my advice would be, find out what the culture is, and find out, what the average age of the dev team is. Right? That's not something that necessarily is protected in any way, right? But if you can give me are most of them this old or this old? I mean, that's okay.
Can I just jump in with that?
Sure.
Experience in this too.
Please do.
A question that you can ask in your interview is just ask what is your feedback loop like? What can I expect in terms of feedback on my performance and what's good company and what's your personal style? Because that is a non-offensive question. It doesn't say, oh my God, I'm going to be really needy, but it's also a question as a hiring manager, I would be like, oh, awesome. So you're putting yourself in the job, you're thinking about, how can I be successful in this job?
That's cool.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. But I would also, on the flip side, be prepared for answering a question with the manager saying, well, how much do you feel you need? So, so there's a fine line to walk there. But with performance management these days, there's so many different models you can adopt. You can have a yearly review, you can have a quarterly review, you can have a 6-month review, you can have agile reviews every week. I mean, it really is up, in my opinion, to the manager. I mean, obviously, the larger the company, the more rigid they're going to be on performance management. So that's something to consider. Anything else? I can't imagine. No? No? Okay. Yes?
You were mentioning the sailors and how they were adding to the...
Yeah.
Was that like the first form version?
Well, I think if they had better version control at that time, they probably would have gone a little bit further, faster.
Well,
But yes.
they wouldn't have thought that the Indies were actually India.
Right. Right. Yes.
So when you're out researching companies, what are some good questions to ask about kind of culture fit?
Yeah, culture is always the really hard thing because you ask somebody to describe their culture, say, it's great. It's always some people love working there. I mean, that's not really what you're looking for, right?
Right.
You really kind of want to figure out, what is the mood? So I would ask to tour the space, number one, because you're still going to find companies that have cubed off, walled off space, and then you're going to find companies that look like this, right? So you might have a preference of which one you prefer, right? Some people prefer to have cubed, walled off space. Some people prefer to have an office. Some people prefer to have this. All of it contributes to a different culture in the company, right? I mean, there's something that's very intentional about setting out a space like this versus setting out a space that has cubes versus setting out a space that has walls. So I would be mindful of that, and certainly do look at but certainly you can ask the questions. And here, what I have tried to do in the past is, if I'm interviewing somebody, and my interviews typically look like I'm going to give you a test, right? So you can prove to me you got the basics. And then we're going to talk with some senior devs and make sure that you can think around corners and find the edges and learn and all those other things that I was talking about. And then, if you pass all those kinds of things, in the moment, again, not everybody's going to do this, but in the moment, I would set you up to go to lunch with my most junior person or somebody that's only been there for 6 months or something like that. Because they're the ones that are going to be able to tell you the best information about what the culture looks like. Mm-hmm. So, perhaps if you're not offered that, you could ask, hey, would you mind if I spoke to one of your junior devs so I can understand more about the culture? That shouldn't be a threatening question. So I
And if it is, that's a red flag.
Yeah.
Correct.
The other question that I've asked over the years is to the developers, what do you like about working there? And that's brought some really, it's like, how long have you worked there, and what do you like about it? And what do you like least about it? And so that has worked really well for me. So, and it gives you a perspective that you don't otherwise get. Because
Right.
they don't offer that information.
Yeah.
And I'd like to jump on that and take that a step further. One of my favorite questions to ask in an interview is when you're talking about your experience from the past, if you've had some experience, I'll ask you, okay, so let's say you were in charge for a day, or you were king for a day. What change would you make about that experience to get it better? Right? The same question would be turned around on the interviewer and say, look, you don't manage this department, right? So pick one of my devs. You don't manage the department. What would you do differently in the department?
Wow.
If you were king for a day? Because that's going to tell you where the warts are, right? That's going to tell you, and if you ask that question to the devs in when you're talking to them, and you get a cross section of that, because sometimes it's going to be panel style, sometimes you're going to get individual. Everybody has a preference for that, how they want to interview. But you're going to find out where some of the warts are if you ask that question.
That's really good. I wish I'd asked that question a couple of times.
Anything else? Yes.
You see a lot of people coming in for interviews. Have you seen the kind of people you're getting change over the years?
Well, so specifically, I have a type that I look for. So I've been a small company guy for my entire career almost. I've had 2 big company experiences, one with Siemens and one with Fujitsu. All told, that was probably 3 years of my professional career. Otherwise, I've been in relatively small companies. Typically, what that means is you have smaller operating budgets. Typically, what that means is you don't have as deep pockets to pay for the experience that you may need at a particular level. So, how I combat that is I try and bring in people that have all these criteria that I can train and mold into the devs that I would like them to be. What that has meant for me in hiring is looking for people that, perhaps were, let's say, not the A students, right, but had jobs, right? They were working, so had grit, the ability to pull themselves through adversity. And that's, some of that comes through in what I've talked about on the screen, but that's that's an intangible that a lot of people do look for. But if you go out to Intel, they're going to go purely on grades and whatnot. You go to Nike purely on grades and whatnot. Small companies, I can't compete with Intel. I can't compete with Nike. I've got to do something a little bit different. So I have in the past specifically instructed my HR team to show me the resumes that do not have the GPAs on them.
Oh.
Because
Does anyone still put their GPAs in the resume?
yeah.
Really?
Mhm. Some people do, and for the very specific reason, everybody makes mistakes. So if you tank, if you're in a 4-year degree program and you tank your sophomore year or junior year, there's very little recovering from that.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't mean they're a bad person or a bad dev. It means they made a mistake. They probably turned 21 and went binged a little bit. As long as they learn something from it, it's okay. Yes.
You mentioned, the 3 points of technical expertise and attitude and aptitude.
Yes.
How would you weigh, for you personally, just the importance between, someone with more technical skill versus the attitude and aptitude? Like, say they're very someone who's knows a lot technically, but maybe isn't that as open to learning versus someone who doesn't know, is a bit greener and doesn't know as much technically, but who's much more open to learning.
I would much rather have the latter. I would much rather have somebody that had limited technical skills but was hungry to learn than having somebody that had over-the-top technical skills and didn't want to, or had a preconceived notion of what they were going to do.
Mm-hmm.
Because the truth is, whatever job you get, you're going to have to be trained. Like, you walk in the door, matters, but you're still going to have to learn how their system works. You're going to have to learn how to use it in that environment. So there's a lot of training that's going to happen, even if you have the full competency skills.
Yep.
And so,
Learning is a lifelong thing,
Yeah.
right? You got to have the attitude to do it and the aptitude to do it efficiently,
yeah.
because if you can't do it efficiently, and everybody can learn efficiently, they just have to learn the right things, right? It's about what your heart is in. It's about what you really, really want, right? So everybody can learn at the same pace as long as it's a topic that's of extreme interest to them, no question. So as long as you couple those two things together, that's powerful. Yes.
What are some things you look for in someone that shows you that they're hungry to learn?
So, projects. So, not just school projects, but what do you do for fun, right? So, do you contribute to open source projects? What problems have you solved? Did you go get yourself a little logic device and start programming it and built this, that, or the other for this? So, in that, it's more about extracurricular kind of activities.
Mm-hmm.
What have you done that shows me you're interested in this outside of the getting paid for it part? Good question. Anything else?
Excellent. Well,
All right. Well, thank you
folks,
guys.
join me in thanking Scott. Okay, all right. Let me make it so I can be seen here and can see. Okay, good. All right, that was excellent. One of the things I particularly liked about it is that in terms of our curriculum here at the Tech Academy, you pretty much just backed up what we've been telling these people about what the actual real world is like. You've got to come to the table with some basic coding skills, absolutely, and be able to think like a developer. But beyond that, it's are you tenacious and eager to learn, and are you a nice person? These are the things that actually genuinely can matter in terms of getting that first job and having any kind of longevity to your career in this industry. We're very intolerant of people who aren't tolerant and kind and nice, if you look at it that way, right? And I love that. It's a very pragmatic industry. Can you code? Yes. Can you be a nice person and cooperate while we try to build something? Yes. All right, you're in. I don't care if you're black, blue, green, whatever, how much experience you have, don't have, how old you are, how young you are. If you bring that to the table, you're going to do well. I wanted to share a little bit right at the end here about a couple recent lessons I've learned and want to pass on. I've been doing a lot of interfacing out in the community with groups that are devoted to entrepreneurial activities. And one of the things, this actually goes back to something Scott and I were talking about a little while ago, one of the things I want to stress is that even if you're not going to be a business owner, an entrepreneur, actually just go out and establish a thing as a new developer, there is a certain truth, I believe, to the idea that you are actually an entrepreneur of your own career and how it gets navigated and the way you brand yourself and manage your own knowledge and your own skill set and the types of jobs you have and your eventual financial and business goals. It really is on you. It hasn't always been that way. Scott and I do actually come from a generation where quite commonly, if you look at mom and dad and what they did, they would find a place to work coming out of college and they would stay there for 7, 10, 15, 20 years. And as the needs of that business changed, you were there, they would help work with you to change your skill set, your training background, what you did so that it fit in with that group. And they would help sort of manage that process, honestly, because you were part of that group and we're all in this together and it's a big giant thing. It isn't very often that way anymore. Scott's had the experience that I have had where there's several different jobs over a career, lots of jobs over a career, and that actually isn't looked at now as typically a bad thing. It was 20, 25 years ago. So what does that tell me? What it tells me that as I'm helping people to become part of this industry, that I want to send them off knowing that you're in charge of your career. It doesn't mean you're going to make decisions that are completely selfish. That isn't it. But do know that you need to be your best advocate. You need to be the one that thinks 2 to 5 years down the line in terms of where you want to be, what skill set you want, what kind of a working environment you want to have, and make that happen. It isn't that you just can't rely on the company you're working for to help you in any way, shape, or form. That's not it. Scott talked about your commitment and buy-in and loyalty and belief in what you're doing, and those things are tremendously important. But it's highly likely that you'll actually work for several people over your career, several companies. Know that, and just put some thought into the future and how you're going to manage that. And if you want to go to entrepreneurial type activities and learn more about how that's done, if you're actually just going to start an activity, I'm sure you can find a parallel to your own career, even if you aren't going to become a business person in the future. So that's Eric's lesson for the day, just based on me going out and interfacing with a bunch of really cool people who are brave or foolhardy enough to start their own businesses and be entrepreneurs. I want to thank you for coming down here. As you know, the students, of course, know where you are. You're at the Tech Academy. We're a software developer training organization that puts on a boot camp where you can become a well-rounded entry-level developer. If you're working full-time at it, it takes about 4 to 5 months. We do offer open enrollment, self-paced curriculum, and you don't have to quit your job and do it as a full-time, oh my God, activity 70 hours a week. You can actually, if you have this life set up, keep your job and do this on the side. Our graduates do really well. They make on average about $60,000 a year when they get done, and we offer job placement assistance, and it's an awesome organization. Obviously, I'm pretty proud of it. So tell your friends about it. If you're already a student, please tell your friends. If you're not a student and you're interested, talk to one of my staff. Thank you for coming, and let's again give a hand to Scott for your help with this. Thank you, online. All right, and anybody who has questions or anything for me or for Scott or anything, we'll be hanging out.
What are the entrepreneurial groups you're going to?
Oregon Entrepreneur Network put on a really fantastic workshop on, it was about 2.5 hours of really solid, well put together information on how to start a business.